Welcome to my podcast, Shine. Today I'm meeting my dear old friend, Christian Ford, who's had quite an interesting life. Christian is a former Navy SEAL whose search for meaning has taken him first from the mountains of Northern California to the most possible rigorous demands of military service, to the most refined and intellectual and philosophical pursuits of civilian life. Christian's story is about more than just his resilience, though. It's about finding purpose in the spaces that aren't yet finished. And also, we hear Christian redefining his success beyond achievements and titles. I hope you join us as we explore Christian's journey of transformation, as he navigates his identity, his purpose, and what it means to have a life of meaning. So you grew up in a pretty normal American household. I think your dad was a physician, right?
That's right.
And your mom was a stay-at-home mom.
That's right. I was blessed to have two very committed, loving parents, which has a lot to do with, I think, where I think I'm at today in life. And she did. She decided to be a stay-at-home mom. It was really important for her to make sure that there was someone watching us, making sure we being me and my siblings, were doing what we were supposed to be doing. My dad worked really long hours, so they were a good team.
So Christian's from Chico, California. How were you academically in high school?
Average. I was maybe toward the end of my final transcript. I think I was a B student.
Okay. So the academics at that point in your life weren't the driving force.
I had other interests, none of which included taking academics seriously. There was a moment, I think, back in what they call middle school now, we called it junior high, where I was in some advanced classes and was doing reasonably well academically. And I think, like a lot of 16-year-old boys, lost the fire for academics. And
found the fire, perhaps.
Or found a fire
else.
somewhere else. Yeah,
exactly.
And I got so much enjoyment, I think, out of the athletics, and I did journalism, I did other things, but yeah, I was not a committed, motivated student by the time I was a junior.
So you had some exceptional physical ability, and I know you to have exceptional intellectual ability today, but at the time you hadn't yet switched that on. Like all 18-year-olds do, to figure out a way to start caring for yourself without your parents' help. And what did that look like for you?
Yeah, I think I somehow was at least squared away enough to recognize that if I went to a 4-year university, I was probably not going to succeed. And the main reason was I was just not interested in academics at that point. I wanted to be out swimming and doing physical activities. And I also, for whatever reason, even though I had a great family life, had a strong inner desire to go out into the world. And I wasn't going to do it by shipping off to a university. So I started looking around for options, knew I wanted to just get out in the world, and started to think about the military. We've had people in our family who've served in the military. And so I went down to the recruiter's office and started talking with some of the recruiters. He was your stereotypical recruiter, very much the salesman. And of course, after the fact, when you sign up, you realize that about 80% of what he said was garbage.
Well, they got you to sign the contract.
But he succeeded. Yeah.
So he got you in the Navy.
Navy all the way.
All the way. So he signed you up. You signed on the dotted line. he sang his song. David played the harp and Christian followed along.
That's right.
And so to tip the cards a little bit, you had an exceptional basic training experience.
I did. I went in thinking I wanted to get into aviation. I wanted to be a pilot. I've always loved aviation. And it's kind of odd in a way. Well, I know why. Part of it is the reason I didn't get into aviation is because I had an astigmatism back then. So I really wasn't qualified. That was at a time when I believe they would not allow you to get corrective surgery because it wasn't the type of surgery that they do now. So they could not provide a waiver for the eyesight. So that kind of knocked me out. Plus, to be a pilot, you have to have a degree.
And you didn't have a degree.
Didn't have a degree. So I thought, okay, I'll go in enlisted, get into some aviation job as an enlisted person, and then I'll work my way up. And then at some point, I'll put in an officer application and then head off to college and then go on to be a pilot. Back to my original or earlier point about not having my heart set on academics, that was also an issue. So once I realized, I would need to actually go through 4 years of school to fly, I think I became less interested. But I've always loved aviation. And so one thing led to another. And like you said, the harps came out. Yeah. The music started playing. And within a couple of weeks, I was heading down to Oakland and I was taking the nuclear field qualification test because he had convinced me that actually nuclear propulsion was my career.
Oh, of course. Which, ladies and gentlemen, is not the end of the story. So
no, it did not end well. I took the test, did well enough on the test that I enlisted as what they used to say, enlisted as a nuke. When I went to basic training in Orlando, which is no longer the recruit training command in Orlando is no longer there. I was in the quote nuclear company and ended up graduating from basic training, went through nuclear field A school. By the time I got to nuclear power school, I realized this was a very, very bad decision. I hated every minute of it. It was absolutely miserable.
So you're in Orlando, your nuke school's not working out, and you still have a contract with the United States government. They've got your body and they're going to do something with it, and it's not going to be nuke school. So what happens then? I
essentially academically washed myself out because I'm not doing the work. And once that happens, you go to what they used to call transient personnel. And that's where they're trying to decide where they're going to put you. And after you, particularly if you end up getting washed out of a special program, like the nuclear propulsion program, the Navy's not excited about sending you to another special program because you've essentially signaled to them that you don't have what it takes. While I was waiting to find out where I was going to go, I had to run a galley, like a cafeteria, right. You would say in the civilian world. As a young E4, I was in charge of feeding hundreds of sailors. And I can tell you, I was not good at that at all. There were some moments where I'm sure people were not satisfied with the customer service they were getting at that galley. So once I did some soul searching, I realized, when I look back in the decision to go to nuke school was a decision that I made for other people, and I didn't make it for myself. And I think that was a growing moment. And so I started to think about, okay, I'm not going to be a pilot because I don't want to go spend 4 years getting a degree at this point. Nuclear propulsion obviously was not for me. But what do I enjoy? What gives me that burning passion?
Well, this leads us to the question that you and I have talked about that you're going to share, which is when you're doing something for Christian, what leads you to the next spot? And it sounds like this is one of those problems that you had, which was you didn't know where to go because you're living for someone else.
looking back and going to Nuke school, what that was, it was almost like a compromise. I think my parents, and I think there was an expectation that I was going to go on to college right out of high school. And that's a fair expectation. And the compromise was, I'll do something that feels academic, like Nuke school, but I'm not actually in college. Kind of a strange way to think of that. But that's how I was thinking of it at the time. And I thought, well, at least I'm in the Navy. At least I'm going to be enjoying the adventure and the experience. What I didn't realize is I was going to be in classrooms from morning until evening, which is precisely what I did not want to do at that point.
Right.
So that was a major growing moment that really kind of set me on a trajectory for the rest of my life. I started talking with some folks when I was at transient personnel. And I can't tell you what their names were. These were people who were out smoking cigarettes out by a picnic table outside of transient personnel. I had maybe 30-minute discussions with them. But what they told me, they being 2 or 3 people who were similarly situated and were older. I remember there was one guy who was older in the Navy. He was heading off to, I can't remember where. But I kind of told him my sob story about Nuke school, and he said, well, what do you like to do? I said, I love swimming. I love being outdoors. I love physically challenging myself. And he said, do you dive? And I said, well, no, I haven't dove. But he said, well, you could be a diver, in the Navy. But he said it's tough to get into dive school, and there's no guarantee that you'll ever dive. If you get assigned to a ship, the ships sometimes have divers assigned to them. He said, you could go to SEAL training, but he said, that's nuts. Yeah. That's kind of a crazy way to get into the water. And as soon as he said that, I didn't hear that latter part. I just heard the first part. You could be a SEAL.
Right.
So I went back and figured out what I needed to do to put in an application for SEAL training. And I went through that process and got orders. I was not in the shape that I was in when I came into the Navy, when I went out. So I started in what they used to call, and they've moved the phases around now, the 4th phase, which counterintuitively was the pre-phase. The 4th phase was the phase before you actually start the real stuff.
Okay.
And that's where they try to get people, you kind of get thrown into the 4th phase, and depending on when the next class is up, some people will start the actual training, a couple weeks after they get there, and then other people like myself, I had to wait a few weeks. They need to make sure that you're conditioned enough that your body can withstand hell week, and that takes a while. So things like make sure your neck muscles are strong enough to carry boats around on your head for several hours. If you have a pencil neck or you're not in shape, you could actually injure your back and injure yourself. Yeah. So a lot of that conditioning is, there's a whole method to the training. It's really remarkable. It's amazing.
Yeah. Obviously I've never been anywhere near it, but you see the results, and the fighters that come out of SEAL training are exceptional. But are you finally doing what you want? Are you living for Christian now?
There was a time, I'd say the last 2 years I was in the team. I love the teams, and the guys I worked with, teammates, they were so good at what they did. And I just learned a lot about life and about achieving success and being a professional and being really, really good at something, what it takes. But we do sometimes and this happen. I've had this happen with other teammates. They get to a point in life where they're ready to move on, and they've done their time. And I was kind of hitting that point about 2 years out from when I got out. I was really into just political philosophy, and we were taking a long trip on a C-17, and I needed something to read because there was nothing else to do. And so I grabbed Plato's Republic, and I was reading it on the C-17. I pulled it out of my bag, and a couple of my teammates were like, "What the heck are you?"
Where did you get Plato's Republic?
So I started taking a night class when we had some time in between deployments. So out of that class, I became very interested in Plato and Plato's Republic.
I think what this speaks to, and the problem that Christian's talking about is as we grow older, what we want to do changes. And you have to know, what you're doing changes, you have to kind of read the room for yourself. And what was the single thing? It wasn't reading Plato's Republic, but what was the single thing that made you know that your life was changing?
Sometimes people step into your life and you need to maintain awareness. Like you need to really reflect on the people you're meeting and talking with and interacting with, because sometimes the people you would not expect are providing you with guidance and advice that is so profound and important. And so I was taking this night class. There was an instructor who was also a Navy veteran. She was a Vietnam veteran. And she taught philosophy, political philosophy. And she was the one who told me, "You really need to think about going to college." And I said, "But I kind of like what I'm doing. I mean, it's an awesome job." And then around that time too, I met Amy, my now wife.
And Amy's a wonderful woman.
Yes, she is.
Well, a lot of students these days take a gap year between high school and college. You had quite a gap year. It's one way to look at it.
Gap decade.
A
almost.
gap decade. So you left the SEALs.
I did. Yep.
What was that like?
I thought it was going to be easier. Definitely missed the guys that I left. And, I'd say most of my teammates were really supportive, to their credit. And they said, "Man, go out and, kick ass. Whatever you're going to do."
Yeah. So what did you do?
Well, I left Virginia Beach and drove all the way back to California by myself. By the way, Amy had already left a few months earlier because her end of obligated service ended before mine. So she went out to California and she started school. And so the idea was, okay, I'll be right behind. When my end of obligated service hits, I'll jump in my truck and drive, and we'll meet up, and I'll enroll in school. My plan was to go back to California. I did look forward to seeing family. I hadn't seen very much for years because I had been out and about, deployed. And so I drove back, enrolled in Cabrillo Community College, and thought I was going to play football there actually for a year. And then applied to UC Berkeley, Cal, and Stanford, and got into Cal actually a year early. Normally they don't accept early transfers. You have to, if you're in a community college, they want you to finish a certain number of units and transfer as a junior.
And you finished up at Cal, and you got a degree in poli-sci.
Yeah, poli-sci, minor in Russian language.
Fast forward to when you and I met, which was...
Do you remember this?
I do, absolutely.
Yeah. You were sitting right across from me, and you were doing what Dan does, by the way, which is asking a bunch of questions and trying to figure out what makes you tick. And so, yeah, you were sitting across from me, and we were talking about academics, and you were trying to kind of probe, like, why are you doing this program, and what have you done in the past? And I remember we got to the point of, yeah, I think at some point I want to go to law school. I may want to teach. I'm really excited about academics. And you said flat out, "Do you want to be a lawyer?" And I said, "I don't think so." And you're like, "Why are you going to law school? You don't go to law school if you don't want to be a lawyer." And I started thinking about that. I said, that's pretty basic, straightforward advice. Yeah, so then at that point, I thought I wanted to teach. So I was applying to both PhD and JD programs or law schools. I ended up getting into Cal's PhD program and the law school there. So I decided that was a terrific option, and so we headed back out to California.
So I knew you at this point, and I was watching you do Christian, which is what we're talking about, is, Christian continually trying to do what Christian needs. And I would say that when I saw you finally settle in to what Christian needs is when James was born.
Yeah, I agree.
Because you kind of had something you loved more than anything else.
Yeah, it changes I think every parent experiences this, your first child. It's when you realize you are 100% responsible for another life. It's kind of why we're here.
Yeah.
I mean, and so yeah, I started to kind of think through my priorities, and we adapted. But yeah, it's probably up to that point the most exciting, in some good ways and some not so good ways, part of my life. Yeah.
At this point, I want to ask you the question, which is, how has building a world for Christian and doing the things for Christian instead of for other people that we've been talking about, how has that helped you understand your place in the world?
One of the things for me that was really helpful is I was lucky enough. I think my parents gave me a foundation, and I also had a wonderful aunt and godfather in SoCal who were extremely supportive. And I think getting that, and of course, being a SEAL for a few years, what all of that did was those experiences and those people in my life kind of gave me that foundation. So you start to think about, you're not scared to take some risks. And also it allows you to kind of to be true to yourself and your heart, and to really focus on what matters as opposed to what matters to other people. And I don't think that's selfishness at all. That's honesty.
Be yourself.
Be yourself.
Yeah.
In some ways, I think, maybe it's counterintuitive, I think selfishness is trying to feed yourself by satisfying other people about things that really at the end don't matter. Whether you've got Ivy League degrees, or maybe you've done something in the military that people find exciting. It doesn't make you a good person. So I think part of that is, where I'm at now is, I think it's more important to, if you're going to leave your mark on this life, it's being a good person, being good to people. Because if you think about it, and I always work on this situational awareness about people who are trying to help you, or people maybe who stopped and you crossed paths with in your life, who did something for you that was so unbelievably generous, and you kind of forget them. You don't see them every day. And I tend to get tunnel vision, which in some ways helped me when I was a SEAL, and in school I could really focus. But that can also work to your detriment if you're not maintaining that awareness of who those people are who are knocking on your door, trying to get you. They're looking at you and they're trying to give you some heartfelt advice. I think what's most important is to raise children who have the skill set, not to be successful per se, right? It's about being happy and having a moral compass and just being good people.
That's a lot of really exceptional insight. And thank you for sharing that. The thing that I have seen you do, Christian, is continue to rearrange your life as you go on. And today you're a partner in a law firm in Houston. And your life looks very different than it did when you were a 16-year-old swimmer.
Yeah, I think one thing I will say is in life, there's so much out there to experience. We're never going to be able to experience everything. We're leaving a lot on the table. We just can't humanly do everything and visit every place we want to visit. But I think the tension is, yes, I'm content where I'm at, and I look forward to seeing my kids, what their next adventure is going to be. But don't ever get comfortable. I always tell myself that. Don't ever get comfortable. If you start getting comfortable and really things become routine, then there's too much life out there to just be comfortable.
Well, I look forward to knowing you for the rest of our lives, because of everyone I know, I think you're probably the person I am least sure about where he will be in 10 years.
That's you and me both.
and that's actually a testament to what we're talking about. It's a testament to you being able to be the authentic Christian. And Christian, I have always been your biggest fan, and I love to see you shine. What an interesting conversation with one of the most affable and chattable warriors I've ever met in my whole life. Now, Christian, as you've heard in this conversation, has had a wide-ranging life. And in his life, there are threads that continue through, even when it's time for him to make dramatic pivots. Now, I want to share something special that I've done concerning the conversation that I've had with Christian. I've made a design brief that I call the essence of self-reflection, that designs and explains a piece of jewelry using the conversation Christian and I just had as the inspiration. Now, you can read or listen to me read the full design brief, along with seeing drawings and renderings in the finished piece on my website at theintrepidwendell.com/shine. I'm really looking forward as well to our next episode, where I meet literally my oldest friend, and I call him my oldest friend because our mothers were in birthing class together. And he talks about his desire to inspire his legacy in his children and his family, a man who is very interested and concerned with what he will leave after he's here no longer. Last but not least, if you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to the podcast and share it with someone who might love to hear Christian's story. You can also go visit our website for more behind-the-scenes content. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing a part of your time with me. My name is Daniel Boettcher, and I love to hear you shine.